Hey guys, tonight we step into the flickering candlelight of a medieval great hall where the air smells like mutton beeswax and a little too much unspoken tension. You've just been married, not exactly for love, but for land lineage and alliances, and now you're standing at the edge of a feast that's meant to celebrate your union. But something's off. Something cold brushes your spine, even as the fire roars. Across the room, your new husband is laughing with a cousin you can't remember the name of. You should be relaxed, relieved even, but your eyes keep drifting toward the man at the head of the table. His father, your father-in-law. He's older, of course, but still sharp-eyed, sharp-tongued, and far too charming for comfort when your gaze meets his, he doesn't look away. He smiles. And not the kind of smile that says, "Welcome to the family." So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere far, or fun, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing how far these sleepy stories reach. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The feast is loud pigs, stuffed with apples musicians playing rebec, and drum servants bustling with trenchers of meat and honeyed almonds. But through it all, you feel that gaze, not the casual fatherly curiosity you'd hope for. This is appraising, as if you're not only the bride of the sun, but an amuse-bouche for the patriarch. When he approaches to toast you, his goblet held a little too high, he clasps your shoulder with 2 fingers. They linger. It's not overt, not quite, but you feel it all the same. To youth, he says, and its sweet surprises. The men around him laugh. You force a smile. Your husband doesn't even seem to notice he's already halfway through his 3rd goblet of mead and retelling a story about how he once outran a boar. You remind yourself that this is normal. Sort of. The medieval marriage market isn't known for its sentimentality. Your property? A dowry with eyebrows. And if the father-in-law thinks you've got pleasing hips, well, who's going to stop him from saying so? Certainly not the women, seated silently at the edge of the table, eyes down, fingers picking at cold bread. Historians still argue whether this kind of harmless flirtation was socially tolerated or simply ignored out of fear. But if you ask the tired old maid serving cider behind you, she'd probably say, "Men can be pigs, and no one cooks the pig but us women." It's not just the way he looks at you. It's when he chooses to speak to you, always, just after your husband has left the room. A brush of the hand when offering you another wedge of cheese, a wink when the musicians strike up a lively tune. Even his compliments are twisted. You're far too graceful for someone raised on barley and well water. You want to believe he's just trying to be pleasant. Maybe this is how noblemen act charming to a fault, even toward their daughters-in-law. But then, why does your skin crawl when he leans in close to tell you how the tapestries in your new chamber were once chosen by a woman who knew how to appreciate the finer textures in life? And yes, the medieval father-in-law has power. Real power. Your husband might have the title now, but he holds the keys to the estate, the favor of the church, the loyalty of the guards. You meanwhile have a fine new gown and a few gold hairpins, not exactly leverage. Dinner drags on. You pick at a candied fig, your stomach too knotted to enjoy the sugar. The priest who married you gives a sleepy blessing, and you almost laugh This poor man, he's the one who told you that your new life would be one of obedience, honor, and piety. No one warned you about sidelong glances across roast boar. Your new mother-in-law is conspicuously silent. She smiles when addressed, sips her wine delicately, and watches you from behind her veil, like a woman who's seen too much and forgotten how to blink. She won't speak to you tonight, maybe ever. The feast finally ends. People rise from their benches with the groans of overfed livestock, and you pretend you don't notice the way your father-in-law's gaze follows you as you stand. Rest well, my dear, he says. The castle can be drafty at night. Another smile, another veiled warning. You can't tell. Later, as you trail behind your handmaid toward the guest wing, you hear laughter echoing down the stone halls. Your new husband is being carried literally by two of his drunken cousins. One of them sings a song with verses that should definitely be punished by God. You are not laughing. You turn a corner, and there he is again, your father-in-law leaning against a carved pillar, like he owns the very shadows. I hope you find our family welcoming, he says, his voice low and steady. If not, I can make adjustments. He doesn't elaborate. He doesn't have to. You give the only response you dare, a nod, a polite smile, and a quick step away. Your heart beats too fast. You suddenly wish you had married that dull merchant your parents first considered. He smelled like pickled herring, but at least he didn't smolder. That night, you lie awake on a straw-stuffed mattress in a room too quiet, too dark, too close to a man you should never have to fear. And yet, here you are, wrapped in silence, eyes wide, heart racing. And this is only night one. The next morning arrives with a low groan from your bones and a stiff neck. You haven't slept much, not that the stone walls or the musty rushes helped, but your real insomnia came from imagining footsteps outside your chamber door. You're not sure if you actually heard them or dreamed them, but once the thought of him standing out there occurred to you, sleep became a fairy tale luxury. Sunlight streams through the narrow window, slit pale and watery. Your maid Lisa arrives with a basin of cold water and a bundle of herbs to freshen your breath. You mutter a greeting, and she offers a meek smile in return, one that makes you wonder if she heard anything, or worse, saw something. But neither of you speaks of it. Your chamber isn't what you expected. It's down a corridor, just past the servants' wing, modest, with a narrow bed, an iron lock that clicks but doesn't truly latch, and a wall that shares space with a room you now know belongs to your father-in-law. It seems innocent at first, practical even. After all, you're newly arrived. Why should you have the lavish master's suite that belongs to your husband? Or perhaps his father still sleeps there. You're not entirely sure, and no one has offered clarity. You try not to overthink it as you brush your hair and change into a fresh wool gown. But even in this small moment of routine, you can't shake the feeling that the chamber assignment wasn't just a matter of space, it was strategic. As you walk the hallway, you realize something else. Your chamber door has no inner bolt. You tested it last night twice. It locks from the outside. Charming. Historians still argue whether medieval women were routinely given private, secure spaces, or if privacy itself was considered suspicious. A woman alone with a locked door that might be more alarming to a noble household than a man's wandering hands. You pass a tapestry showing the martyrdom of Saint Agnes, flames licking her bare feet, while leering soldiers look on. Someone embroidered that lovingly stitch by stitch as if to say, "See, this is what happens to women who keep their virtue." Down in the great hall, breakfast is subdued. Cold meat, day-old bread, and yesterday's wine reheated into a bitter stew. Your husband, bleary-eyed and still half-drunk, manages a grin. "Didn't I warn you?" he chuckles. "Father likes to test the new ones. See if you've got iron in your veins." He slaps your back like you're a new squire, not his wife. Just ignore him. He's mostly bark. Mostly. You force a laugh. You can't say what you're really thinking. He's bark, yes, but he's already halfway through biting. Your father-in-law arrives late. He strides in with the confidence of someone who has never apologized in his life. His clothes are crisp, fur-lined, far richer than your husband's. He looks you over again and says nothing. Just a nod. Then he seats himself beside you. Not across, not down the table. Right next to you. The servants hesitate, plates in hand, confused by this breach in routine. But no one says a word. He leans toward you as he chews. "Sleep well," he asks, his voice a whisper only you can hear. You nod tightly. Your hands grip your spoon like a weapon. Any noises in the night, he adds. These old walls creak. So easy to mistake things in the dark. That's when your spoon slips, drops right into your lap with a wet splash. You fumble, and he of course reaches under the table to help retrieve it. You jerk back. Too quickly. The bench scrapes. The hall quiets for half a second before the din resumes. He straightens, smiling faintly, as if you're the one who's acting strangely. You're learning now. He plays this game in full view of others because he knows you won't make a scene. He's clever. Old enough to know every trick, every loophole, every innocent gesture that can be explained away. After breakfast, you wander the manor grounds alone, at least as alone as a noblewoman can be. You walk past the stables, the herb garden, the dovecote trying to gather yourself. The air is damp with dew and geese hiss as you pass. Even nature seems slightly annoyed today. Near the orchard you find a small bench beside an aging willow. You sit hoping for quiet. But of course that doesn't last. He's there again. You don't hear him approach. He simply appears behind you like he belongs to the silence. "You favor solitude," he says. You glance up. "I favor air that isn't soaked in wine and boast." He chuckles. Sharp tongue. My son always did like that in a woman. Until it turns on him, of course. You stand about to leave, but he blocks your path. Not with force, just presence. "I'd like us to get along," he says. "Really. I remember what it's like to be new in this place. No allies, no anchor, just stone straw and stairs." You don't respond. You stare past him. Then, in one of those moments that future historians will endlessly debate, was it accidental, deliberate, cultural? He reaches out, brushes a strand of hair from your cheek, too intimate, too possessive. And just like that, your heart drops into your stomach. You mutter something. Thanks. Or maybe nothing at all. You step around him. You walk away too fast to look composed, and you realize something as you go. This isn't an awkward misunderstanding. This isn't a game. This is a warning. He wants you. And he's testing how long you'll stay quiet about it. You don't go back to the orchard. Not the next day. Not the day after. You pretend it doesn't exist, even as its sweet, heavy scent drifts through the castle windows every morning. Apples ripening under the sun bees humming lazily above them, and all you can taste is bile. But it doesn't matter. He finds other ways. Today, it's in the great hall again. You're seated for midday meal, bland barley stew and crusts of bread hard enough to chip a tooth, and he chooses to stand behind you. Not beside, not across, directly behind. You feel him more than hear him, the shift of his weight, the faintest exhale the air displaced when he leans just slightly closer than needed. Then a hand, just 2 fingers, brushing against your hair as if straightening a braid, which isn't even out of place. You flinch. Of course you do. And when your husband looks up at the motion, your father-in-law simply pats your shoulder with a casual parental air. She's jumpy, he laughs. Not used to castles yet. Your husband grins, mouth full. She grew up with pigs. Now she gets chandeliers. Be gentle with her father. And that's the moment it clicks. No one will come to your defense if you're the only one who notices the storm on the horizon. Not if the sky still looks blue to everyone else. You learn the patterns quickly. He approaches you only when your husband is away. He compliments your sewing, your posture, your temperance, all with a tone that manages to be both praising and possessive. One morning, he even offers you a slice of apple from his own knife blade still wet with juice. The gesture is casual. The blade is not. Historians love debating what counted as harassment in medieval Europe. There were codes, sure, rules about propriety, chivalry, honor, but mostly for the men to reference when dueling over wounded pride. For women, the boundaries were blurry. If a lord took an interest in you, it wasn't always an insult. Sometimes it was a compliment. Sometimes it was your entire fate. You begin avoiding him, not obviously, but strategically. You time your meals later. You linger longer in the chapel. You keep the maid at your side when walking the gardens, even when Lisa complains that her feet hurt. You nod, smile, withdraw. Your world becomes narrow, reduced to corners and glances and mental maps of where he is and how far you are from him. But it's not enough. It happens on a gray afternoon when the clouds press low against the towers and the rain taps like impatient fingers on the arrow-slit windows. You're in the solar with your embroidery dutifully stitching a wobbly-looking hawk onto linen. Your husband is out inspecting the grain stores, and you think foolishly that you're alone. He enters without knocking. Not unusual. Technically, this is his castle, but there's something different in the way he shuts the door. It doesn't latch. It just closes. You rise, slow and polite. My lord. He holds a small apple in his hand. Not sliced, not offered, just cradled gently like a gift. You should have been born a few years earlier. He says, tone wistful eyes not leaving yours. You don't respond. What could you say to that? He steps closer. I would have made you a fine match, he adds. Given you a better chamber, better dresses, maybe even a horse. Your hands clench the edge of the embroidery frame. Your son is kind, you say, voice calm but tight. I'm content. Are you? He asks. He sets the apple on the table beside you. I doubt that. Then silence. Not the heavy, ominous kind. No. This is worse. It's the casual pause of a man who knows he has time, who knows that if you scream, no one will believe it's about him. And suddenly, you're not sure whether you're terrified or furious. You walk past him, open the door wide. You say nothing. You don't have to. He watches you go, and for once, says nothing either. That night, your chamber feels colder. Maybe it's the weather. Maybe it's the knowledge that your escape plans can't just be embroidery, polite deflections, and careful routes. You need allies. The next day during morning prayers, you look for the other women, the ones who've learned to survive in shadows. The old nursemaid with the twisted back, the widowed aunt who never speaks but sees everything, even the scullery girl who never looks anyone in the eye. Women like you, who live with secrets, who've smelled the rot beneath roses. You start to speak softly over sewing, over cider, over shared glances and half-finished sentences. You learn that you're not the first. One woman whispers about a cousin sent away to a convent after refusing Lord Durand's affections. Another speaks of a maid who became too familiar and disappeared during a night storm. No body, no inquiries, just gone. And the most chilling detail, they all say the same thing. He never gets his hands dirty. He doesn't need to. But sometimes, only sometimes, he picks a woman who resists. And he makes a show of breaking her. And that's when you understand. You're not a new bride. You're a test. The chapel isn't peaceful anymore. It used to be the one place where you could slow your breath, feel the chill stone beneath your knees and pretend the flickering candlelight meant safety. But now, even here, his shadow creeps in, because you can never quite forget that this very altar once blessed his marriage too. A long-dead wife, a string of quiet affairs, a reputation dressed up in piety. You kneel in the front pew, hands folded, murmuring a prayer that's more whispered bargain than devotion. Let him lose interest. Let him forget me. Let someone else draw his attention. But you know better. You've seen his gaze tighten, not fade. Behind you, someone clears their throat. You flinch. It's only the priest. Father Barron. Old, hunched, gentle, or so he presents himself. His sermons are dull. His breath always smells of onions, and his voice has a way of droning like bees trapped in a flask. But still, he's a man of God. He has to listen, doesn't he? You wait until confession. In the tiny stone alcove, you kneel again this time, enclosed in shadows that press tighter than any wall. You speak slowly, cautiously. Forgive me, Father, for I fear I harbor impure thoughts. His breath hitches slightly. Of what kind, my child? Not mine, you say. Another's? Directed toward me? He falls silent. You continue. An elder man? A relation? His words are not fitting. There's a pause. Then many men struggle with temptation. It is the woman's burden to remain modest. You blink. Modest? You barely speak. You barely look. You exist in doorways pressed against edges, your voice as quiet as breath. Sometimes he adds a daughter-in-law becomes like a jewel in the father's crown. Beautiful, yes, but dangerous if flaunted. You realize with a sudden chill that you've made a mistake. This is not a sanctuary. This is a cage disguised as a chapel. Historians still argue whether confessors in the Middle Ages were reliable protectors for women, or merely enforcers of silence. The truth is, many priests were educated, yes, but education didn't always come with empathy. You thank him. You rise. You leave with his blessing pressing down on your shoulders like a second skin. Later that evening, as you walk past the high window arches, you see the priest speaking to your father-in-law, laughing, clapping his back. The same crooked-toothed smile he offered you only now, directed toward power. You stop believing in sanctuary. That night, your husband joins you in your chamber. It's rare. He stumbles in half-drunk and half-apologetic with breath that smells like apples and clove. I've been busy, he slurs, and you've been quiet. You nod. He plops beside you on the straw-stuffed mattress, boots still on. Father says you're aloof. that you wander too much. He thinks you're hiding something. Your pulse skips. And what do you think you ask carefully? He shrugs. I think you're strange. Pretty, though. He chuckles. Father said you remind him of his first mistress. That's high praise, believe it or not. You say nothing, because that sentence right there, that string of casual betrayal wrapped in a joke, is what will keep you up all night. You wake to cold silence. No husband, no sound. Just the creak of settling beams and the hush of distant wind. You sit up, the door creaks. You freeze. It doesn't open, but it moves just slightly like someone gently tested it. From the outside, you lie still, heart-hammering eyes fixed on the latch that does nothing. Your breath is shallow. You don't sleep again. The next morning, you ask Lisa, delicately, if she ever notices strange footsteps at night. Her eyes narrow just a little. Then she says too brightly, "No, my lady, only the wind." But that night, without you asking, she sleeps on the floor beside your bed, wrapped in a threadbare shawl, pretending to snore. You understand? This is her language for yes. I hear them too. The next few days blur together. You find yourself praying, but not to God, to timing, to shadows, to silence. You count the distance between yourself and him, in footsteps, in door frames, in heartbeats. One afternoon, you cross paths in the corridor. He stops. "You're avoiding me," he says. You look at the stone floor. "I've been ill." He lifts a hand to your face. You jerk away. He doesn't smile this time. "Careful," he murmurs. "A woman in this house needs friends." Then he turns and leaves. And that somehow terrifies you more than any flirtation. Because the performance is over now. He's dropped the act. There's no more courtly compliments. Just threat. You find yourself drifting toward the older women again. The ones who wear layers not for fashion, but for armor. The ones who don't ask questions, but do hand you bread, laced with calming herbs. One of them, the wrinkled laundress with hands like rope, leans close and whispers, "There's a reason the last daughter-in-law left without her trunks." She doesn't explain. She doesn't need to. You've begun to notice that the women in the manor don't just exist. They signal. It's not always clear at first. But once you learn the language, it speaks in every hemline, every cough, every stray spool of thread left in an unlikely place. The laundress who forgets to collect your shift for washing so you won't have to leave your chamber. The cook who always makes sure you're seated between two matrons during meals. The stable girl who shows up at the side gate whenever you pace the garden. Paths too long. You realize there's a quiet network at work, an invisible braid of mutual protection twisted through the female quarters of the castle. It begins over embroidery. You're in the solar again. The daylight flat and gray, across the wooden floor, needle in hand. You're pretending to focus on your stitches, some crude vine pattern. But in truth, you're listening to the rhythm of footsteps in the hall. Beside you, Lady Brynhild, the aging aunt of your husband, childless and silver-haired, glances sideways, and then without lifting her eyes from her own embroidery murmurs, "You may want to switch to blue." The yellow draws attention. It's nothing. It's everything. That evening you choose a dull brown kirtle for supper. You braid your hair tight and simple. No ribbons, no perfumes. You keep your voice soft and your smile softer. Still you feel his eyes. Always his eyes. He speaks less now, but watches more, like a hound learning when to pounce. Historians agree that noble women were rarely alone in the Middle Ages, but solitude wasn't the danger. Being seen as available was. A woman without protection, male or social, was a feast for rumors and ruin. So you align yourself with the quiet ranks. You start spending afternoons in the weaving room. It's loud, smoky, and always smells of lanolin, but it's safe. There are no lords here, just women and wool and whispers. You sew alongside them, prick your finger too often, and listen. You hear a tale from a woman named Magda, once handmaid to a baroness who went mad after childbirth, or so they said. Magda claims it wasn't madness, but pressure from the Lord's father, who decided the young baroness belonged to him. She was 19. Magda mutters, hands raw from dye. They put her in a convent, said she saw demons. The real demon still collects tithes. Another woman speaks of her cousin sent to another household to train as a servant. She returned 2 years later, with sunken eyes and a bastard child no one dared name. She bit a priest once, the woman adds. That's how you know she survived. You laugh quietly. A real laugh, if bitter. It's the first one in days. In the kitchen courtyard, you help chop turnips just to keep your hands busy. The cook, a round woman named Alice, with the authority of a queen and the temper of a wet cat, slaps your wrist gently when you slice too thick. Thin pieces cook faster, she says, then almost as an afterthought, and they give you an excuse to leave earlier. Later, she hands you a satchel of herbs. Put this under your mattress, she says. The scent keeps dreams away. You do. It helps. One afternoon, you see the old midwife, Mother Jahan, eyes like river stones, teaching the scullery girls how to bind their hair with strips of nettle fiber. You ask her why. So they itch, she says simply. So if someone touches them at night, they'll know. That night you twist nettle into your braids. He doesn't come. But the door clicks again. You hear it clearly this time. No entry. Just that gentle probing test of boundaries. The latch lifts, pauses, then settles again. The next morning you find a scrap of parchment slipped beneath the door, folded neatly. No signature. Inside, you've made yourself plain, but not invisible. Your fingers go cold. You carry the note to the weaving room and place it face down on the hearth. It curls black in the fire. No one asks what it was. They all smell the smoke. They know. That afternoon, Lady Brynhild brings you a scrap of fine cloth. For your embroidery, she says, a new project. But when you unfold it, you find an unfinished tapestry, just a corner of a larger scene. A castle, a figure at a window, a hand on the latch, and embroidered in tiny, careful stitches beneath it. We are watching too. Historians sometimes marvel at the mystery of surviving needlework, why some samplers feature odd symbols or hidden initials or tiny details only visible from the back. They never wonder if women stitched warnings. You wonder how many stories have been sewn into silence. And for the first time, you begin to feel not safe, but less alone. That night, you sleep better. Not deeply, but enough. It's amazing how danger makes you sharper. You begin to sense things you once missed, the creak of a floorboard before it groans, the way voices lower behind closed doors, the specific pitch of laughter that signals power rather than joy. You become a scholar of micro-expressions of glances traded behind goblets of phrases that seem harmless but settle like pebbles in your gut. So when the feast is announced, one to honor some visiting knight and a distant cousin, You brace yourself. You know your father-in-law loves an audience. And this time, the stage will be set in his favor. Tables full of vassal servants, too busy to notice, and wine that flows faster than common sense. You dress plainly again. No lace, no rings. Your sleeves tied tight at the wrist. Lisa helps you pin your hair into the least flattering shape possible. It doesn't matter. You know now this isn't about beauty. It's about control. The hall glows with torchlight. The long tables are laden with game bread trenches, piled high, roasted onions glistening with grease. Your husband is already well into his cups, laughing too loudly at a joke you suspect he didn't hear. You sit beside him, as expected. But when your father-in-law arrives, he does not take his usual seat at the head of the table. No, tonight he sits beside you. Your stomach turns. The whole hall watches it happen, and not one person blinks. Not your husband, not the priest, not the steward. The chairs have been placed this way, planned. Lovely evening, he says, helping himself to the meat on your plate without asking. And you look surprisingly modest. You say nothing. He leans in just slightly, his shoulder brushing yours, and whispers, "Doesn't matter what you wear." Some jewels shine brighter when hidden. You smile just enough to show your teeth. The meal drags. There are toasts performances from a pair of traveling jugglers, a lute player who plucks the same 4 notes for half an hour. You feel none of it. You are busy calculating who's watching, who's close, where the exits are. And then, near the end of the feast, it happens. The cloakroom. You've barely risen from the bench when your husband claps a cousin on the back and stumbles toward the privy, muttering about too much cider. You take your chance to retreat, just a moment to breathe. Maybe find Lise, maybe even slip out into the garden for a minute of damp silence. But the corridor is quiet. Too quiet. And just as you reach the corner near the cloakroom, a hand grabs your wrist. Not roughly, not violently, just firmly. Your father-in-law. He smiles. "Leaving already? The night's barely begun." You pull your hand back. "I needed air. There's plenty in here." He glances toward the stacked cloaks and the narrow bench. "It's cozy." You step back. "I don't want cozy." That finally makes his smile falter. For a flicker. Then he replaces it with something colder. "You're being difficult," he says. "My son is a fool. You deserve more. I offer you security, power, even affection if that matters to you." You stare at him. "You're married, you say." "To my husband's mother." He waves that off. An arrangement. She's content with her tapestries and her cats. Your voice is steady now. "You're disgusting." He doesn't flinch. He steps closer. "I've ruined women for less." And there it is. The mask peeled back. The predator, with the courtesy, burned away. Historians still argue how often women fought back, or could whether laws or customs truly offered any defense. But none of those debates help you now. Because you're alone. In a cloakroom. With a man who sees you as a prize that ought to be grateful. You don't scream. Instead, you do something better. You talk. Loudly. "Lord. Durand." You say clear enough to echo against the stone you've dropped your goblet. He freezes. Footsteps. 3 of them. Lady Brennhild, the steward's daughter, and Lise carrying a tray of spiced wine. They round the corner just in time to see you step backward and him straighten his cloak with forced calm. "Everything all right, my lord?" Brennhild asks coolly, her eyes flicking to you for confirmation. He recovers fast. "Of course. My daughter-in-law was just thanking me for the feast. You bow your head. Indeed, it was memorable. He leaves first. You remain a moment longer, catching your breath. Lisi touches your arm. We saw him leave the table, she murmurs. We followed. The steward's daughter, no more than 16, adds. He does this. 2 new girls. Brennhild warned us. Brennhild says nothing. She just looks at you like you've finally passed a test she's been waiting to see you take. That night, your door stays shut. No clicking latch, no footsteps, but you still don't sleep. Not because of fear, because of fury, and a growing sense that next time, if there is a next time, it won't be. You caught off guard. You wake to a headache. Not from wine, but from clenching your jaw in your sleep. The kind of ache that settles behind your eyes and hums like a hornet trapped in bone. You sit up, slowly, stretch your fingers and feel the sore joints that come from constantly bracing yourself, shoulders up, stomach, tight spine, stiff as a lance. Lise is already at the foot of the bed, folding a fresh shift. She says nothing about the night before, just nods once like a soldier acknowledging another on the field. You decide not to attend breakfast. You claim a headache true enough and remain in your chamber. Lisa brings you bread and a bit of dried apple, and you chew it slowly while staring at the cold hearth. Outside, the rain taps on the glass like it's trying to spell something you've already guessed. You need a plan. You try to think like a man. You try to imagine yourself as someone who can make threats, raise armies, swing swords, but all you have is needlework and caution and a name that means less in this household than a whisper in wind. So you turn to subtler tactics. Today, you begin your first sick day, and it won't be your last. You lie in bed longer. You look pale. You wince when you stand. You eat very little. You smile with slow, vague confusion when asked questions. You become quite simply fragile. And no man, not even one as emboldened as Lord Durand, wants to bruise fruit already half rotten. Historians often skim over this particular strategy, but in the footnotes and letters and journals, a theme repeats: women claiming illness to escape proximity. The headache, the bleeding, the vapors. Entire chapters of medieval survival written in coughs and clutches of the chest. By the 3rd day, you've gained a small mercy distance. He doesn't speak to you during meals. He doesn't approach in the hall. He doesn't stop watching, but he stops acting. And that, for now, is enough. But feigned illness has its limits. By the 6th day, your husband begins to grumble. Are you ever well? He mutters over salted fish, stabbing the fork like he blames it for your weariness. I need prayer, you reply softly, and maybe a little time away. From me, he asks, not angry, just surprised. You shake your head. From these walls. And here is where your plan begins. You propose a pilgrimage. There's a shrine not far St. Eloise of the Hollow Tree. She's rumored to cure women's complaints, especially those of the quiet heart. A few nobles visit it yearly. Nothing grand, just a small stone chapel tucked into forest, tended by nuns and the occasional traveling monk. It's a perfect excuse, a spiritual retreat, a gesture of piety, a reason to get out of reach. At first, your husband shrugs, seems unnecessary. But then, as if echoing from behind his eyes, you see your father-in-law's disapproval twitch like a rope pulled taut, and suddenly your husband says, "Perhaps you're right. A week away might clear your head." You're stunned, but you know better than to ask why. You say thank you. You say you'll pray for him. You say all the right things. Lisa helps pack your things. She hums a low tune as she folds your cloak, slipping dried lavender into the lining. Are you sure this is wise? She asks gently. You shrug. It's the only move left. You depart at dawn with 2 guards, both older and dull-eyed men, chosen no doubt to make sure you return. As you leave the gates, you glance back. Lord Durand is on the rampart, arms folded. He does not wave. He does not smile. But you can tell he's not pleased. Which means for now, you've done something right. The road is muddy and slow. You rock in the saddle bones, aching. The shrine lies 2 days' ride beyond the woods near a bend in the river, and a cluster of forgotten villages. The guards barely speak, save for muttering about the weather and the state of the oats. But you don't mind. The silence is the first true peace you've tasted in weeks. You arrive on the 3rd morning cloak, soaked through hair, plastered to your temple. The shrine is small, stone, built moss-covered, nestled beneath an ancient tree that looks like it might whisper if it had a mouth. The nuns greet you quietly. Their faces are round and plain and clean. No rouge, no veils of deceit, just peace. You could cry. They don't ask questions. They give you a cot, a warm basin, and a steaming bowl of barley and leeks. They pray with you in the evening. And at night, they let you be. You sleep soundly. For the first time since your wedding, you dream without door latches. Historians love the idea of pilgrimage as redemption. But for women, it was often something else refuge, a place to think, to remember who you were before you were someone's bargaining chip. By the 4th day, you realize you have no plan for what comes next. You only know you can't go back unchanged. And you won't. Because as the sun sets behind the chapel, you make your real vow not to Saint Eloise, to yourself. I will survive this. I will outlast him. The nuns at Saint Eloise's shrine are used to women who don't speak much. Some come limping from childbirth. Some weep through the night and claim visions of devils. A few have bruises too fresh to be caused by falling from any mule. No one asks. That's the beauty of this place. You're not questioned, you're simply allowed to exist. Your days fall into rhythm morning prayers, a shared meal of stewed grains and dried fruit tending the herb beds, evenings with candlelight and psalms. But your mind doesn't rest. Not entirely. Because peace, when borrowed, is never free. On the 5th day, a monk arrives, Brother Hallis, soft-spoken and fresh-faced. He brings bread, holy oil, and the weekly news from nearby towns. He also brings the unease of male presence into this fragile sanctuary. The nuns trust him. You're not sure if you do. Still, something in you stirs. This might be your chance. You ask carefully, politely, to speak with him in private. He seems startled, but agrees. The small side chamber where you meet smells of candle wax and lavender. You sit on opposite sides of a wooden bench, hands folded, posture stiff. You don't look at him as you begin. I've received unwanted attention, you say, from someone close, someone powerful. I don't know what to do. He's quiet a moment. Then, your husband? You shake your head. His father. He leans back, frowns. That is complicated. You almost laugh. That word complicated is the understatement of the century. I've made it clear I want nothing. You continue. But I worry. He has a reputation. Brother Hallis nods slowly, thumb rubbing his chin. I've heard stories. About Lord Durand. Many, actually. This startles you. You have? He shrugs. One doesn't travel among clergy without hearing what shadows the noble families cast. You take a breath. Then help me. Please. He's quiet again. Then he says something that sends cold through your ribs. You must return. Your stomach turns. He is your husband's blood, Hollis explains. There is no path forward if you stay here. He'll say you've run, that you're unstable, or worse, unfaithful. And if I am unfaithful, you snap. What happens then? He blinks. I'm not, you add quickly. But does it even matter? Of course, it matters, he says. But in the eyes of your house, your duty is to endure. For now. The words feel like a door slamming shut. Historians still argue about the clergy's role in protecting or failing noblewomen. Confessors could be allies or informants. Monks could offer sanctuary or pressure. And in the space between countless women slipped silently into convents or into graves. You rise. Thank you, brother, you murmur. He bows. I will pray for you. You want to tell him not to bother. The next morning, your escort returns. 2 fresh guards. Different faces. More alert. Less friendly. You glance at their armor polished bearing your father-in-law's crest. A subtle message, I know where you are. I decide who comes for you. You pack slowly. The nuns don't ask questions, but Sister Orla, the eldest, presses something into your palm before you leave. A small pouch. Inside herbs. A folded note. The note reads, dreamless sleep. Or 2 drops more, and even a hound won't wake you. You stare at it for a long time. On the road back, your thoughts spiral. You imagine not returning, fleeing instead, living in a village, hiding your name, becoming a weaver or a midwife or a ghost. But you know the truth. You'd be found. You'd be dragged back. And then you wouldn't be a nuisance, you'd be an example. So you ride through the wet trees, past fields of cows and bramble and guilt. By dusk, the manor rises. Before you, just as grim and gray as you remember. No welcome party. No husband at the gate. Just a squire to lead your horse. And a servant to take your bag. But the eyes, oh, the eyes, they're everywhere. As you pass through the great hall, you see him, Lord Durand, seated as though he's always been there, as though he never left that bench, never blinked, never breathed, just waited. He rises as you approach. Pilgrimage suited you, he says. You look refreshed. You offer the faintest curtsy. The air was clean. He studies you. No epiphany, no divine message. Oh, I received a message, you reply, loud and clear. He smiles, but his eyes tighten. Good. I worried you'd find refuge in fantasies. You walk past him. And as you do, you catch at the tiniest flinch. Barely a movement. A hitch in his breath. Because he doesn't know what you mean by message. And not knowing makes him nervous. That's power. Small, yes, but yours. That night, Lise returns to your chamber with hot wine and a familiar glance. He watched the road for 2 days, she whispers. Paced the rampart like a caged dog. You take the wine and smile, then let him wonder if I've come back with teeth. You sleep without touching the herb pouch, but you tuck it under your pillow anyway. Just in case. The manor doesn't welcome you back. It swallows you. The doors creak open with the same indifference they had when you first crossed the threshold. The stones underfoot are just as cold, and the servant's gaze is just as quick to dart away. But something has changed. Not outside, inside you. You know now that fear can be worn like a second skin, but so can strategy. On your second day home, you ask Lisa to prepare a new dress, one you haven't worn yet. dark green, high-collared with tight sleeves, and a hem that just brushes the floor like fog. It's a dress that says, "I'm still here. I'm still watching." When you enter the great hall for supper, your husband looks up startled. Feeling better then, you nod. The pilgrimage helped. He grunts. "Well, Father's glad you're back. He's planning another hunt soon. Says the woods are full of boar." You nod again, taking your seat. You don't look at Lord Durand. Not at first, but he looks at you. And for the first time in weeks, he says nothing. No clever greeting. No double-meaning compliments. Just silence. Which means one of two things: he's recalibrating or he's plotting. You eat slowly, deliberately. Lisa, standing behind you, places her hand lightly on your chair every so often. A silent rhythm, a pulse of presence, a message you are not alone. Still, even silence can threaten. So you take a step you never thought you would. You write a letter, not to your family, too far, too powerless, to the abbot of a neighboring priory, a man your father once traded land with, a man who owes your house a favor. You keep it simple: a polite inquiry, a mention of your recent pilgrimage, a vague concern for spiritual guidance. You don't name Lord Durand, but you write between the lines. Lise slips it to a traveling peddler. No seal, no crest, just parchment and ink, and the quiet weight of desperation. Historians often overlook how letters worked in a woman's world. Men wrote of war and tax and politics. Women wrote of gardens, festivals, and saints, but always between the lines ran another story. Coded warnings, gentle pleas, veiled cries for help. You wait. Meanwhile, you begin to see things differently. Your husband, once just bumbling and drunk, now strikes you as lost. He fidgets when his father speaks. He defers too quickly. You start to wonder if he fears Lord Durand, too. One evening, you find him alone in the solar, staring at the fire. You sit beside him. "My lord," you say softly. "Are you well?" He exhales through his nose. "Don't call me that. It sounds like you don't mean it." You say nothing. He glances at you. "You've been different since you came back." You nod. "I saw women at the shrine. Broken women. Women who didn't return to their husbands. I realized I don't want to become one of them." His face pales a little. "Is that what you think will happen?" Here I don't think you reply. I know. He stares into the fire. "My father, he's always been proud, difficult. But he loves this family. Everything he does is for legacy." You want to laugh. Instead, you ask, "And what does he leave behind, if all he builds is fear?" He doesn't answer, but he doesn't argue either. You leave the room before the silence turns sour. The next morning, there's a knock at your chamber door. You're halfway through, brushing your hair. Lisa opens it. Standing there is a girl you don't recognize, younger than Lisa, wide-eyed, trembling. "My lady," she whispers, voice tight, "he sent me to your room." Your breath stops. Who you ask, though you already know? "Lord Durand. Said I was to help you, bathe you, whatever you wished." You rise, step toward her. "Did he touch you?" you ask. She shakes her head. "Not yet." You glance at Lisa. She's already reaching for her shawl. "Take her to the kitchens," you say. "Put her under Cook's eye. No one touches a girl near Cook." Lise nods, leads the girl away. You sit. You realize the game has changed again. He's not just testing you. Now he's widening the circle, spreading threat like ink in water. That night, you don't sleep. You sit by the fire, the herb pouch in your hand. You open it, pinch out a bit, just enough for a dreamless night. But not the extra drops. Not yet. Because this isn't over. And if you fall asleep now, you might miss the next move. The next few days slither by like a dream you can't wake from. Never quite a nightmare. Never quite peaceful. Just taut. A string pulled tighter with each hour, each glance, each step across the cold stone floor. You go through the motions, meals, embroidery, polite nods at prayers. But every task feels like a performance staged for an audience of one. You don't see Lord Durand often, not directly, but you feel him. He's in the shift of the guards' rotations, the new servant assigned to pour your wine, the unexpected delay when your bathwater arrives just a little too late or a little too cold. He doesn't touch, he doesn't even speak anymore, but his fingerprints are on every corner of your day. And then comes the story. Lisa hears it first from a laundress, a noblewoman years ago, Durand's cousin's wife. Said no. Disappeared. They claimed she died in childbirth. She wasn't even pregnant. Lisa whispers to you that night, tucking the windows closed tight. She had a hound, that's all. The dog died the same night she vanished. You press your lips together. Did anyone ask questions? Lisa shrugs. Not where the Lord's shadow falls. You understand now why the older women in the household walk like they're carrying invisible weights. Not age, but memory. One morning you wake to find a note tucked inside your prayer book. No seal, just 3 words written in an elegant, deliberate hand. Choose your silence. You read it twice, then burn it in your hearth. That day, you tell Lisa to find someone. Quietly. The maid from weeks ago, the one who claimed her former lady vanished after refusing her lord's attention. Her name is Imelda. You arrange to accidentally cross paths in the solar during a mending hour. She's younger than you expected. Slender. Worn hands. But her eyes, they're old. Sharp. Like someone who stood too close to too many flames. You offer her a smile. She doesn't return it. Lady says, you want a tale. She says flatly, not bothering with pleasantries. You nod. The truth, if you still have it. She shrugs. Some of it. The rest I dreamed away. You wait. She was beautiful, Imelda says. Not like court beautiful, real beautiful. Strong wrists. Could ride better than any man. She married young. Her husband was weak. She made enemies. You nod. You've seen this pattern. Lord Durand visited often. Said he wanted to discuss strategy, trade routes. But he always came when her husband was gone. Always lingered too long in the halls. Your stomach tightens. One day she slapped him. Hard. In front of 2 guards. She didn't scream. Just slapped and said, "Don't mistake silence for consent." Imelda smiles faintly. That was the last time I saw her. They killed her, you whisper. Imelda shakes her head. No, that's not his way. He removes, sends them to places where they vanish. Convent worse, somewhere far, deep in the forests, paid nuns who ask no questions. And if she resists, Imelda doesn't finish the sentence. You don't need her to. Historians still argue how often noblewomen were reassigned under the guise of religious calling. But when records vanish and land is quietly reclaimed, it rarely smells like prayer. Why are you telling me this? You ask. Imelda's voice softens. Because you looked at me like I wasn't invisible. You nod. I'm not done looking. That night you go to the chapel again. Alone. You kneel. Not to pray, but to think. The stone digs into your knees. The candlelight flickers in your periphery. You breathe in wax smoke and the faintest hint of mildew. Then you hear it. Steps. You don't move. The door is open behind you. My lady, comes a voice you know too well. Lord Durand. You stay kneeling. So devout, he says. I admire your discipline. You still don't turn. The saints were women once. Then they were burned or broken or blessed. He chuckles. They were holy. They were witnesses, you reply. Silence. Then I've grown tired of your resistance, he says, not unkindly. Your husband is weak. I can offer you more. You finally rise and turn. I'm not interested in offers, you say, keeping your voice steady. I'm interested in freedom. You have it, he says, gesturing to the chapel. All this, comfort, safety, at the price of my voice. He frowns. Be careful, girl. You're not the first woman to mistake defiance for strength. You step toward him. No, but I might be the first who wins. He laughs once dryly. You think your veiled words and knowing glances will stop me? No, you say softly, but they'll make sure I'm not the one who disappears quietly. You walk past him. For the first time, he doesn't follow. You know now what you're doing. You're not playing the fool. You're preparing the battlefield. You start laughing in public. Not the deep, genuine laugh that comes from joy. Because let's be honest, you haven't felt that in months. But the kind of laugh that makes people second guess whether you've lost your mind or simply found something they haven't. It begins during a supper, when your husband is telling one of his recycled stories about the time he wrestled a swan. You chuckle, lightly, then harder. Soon, you're giggling uncontrollably, eyes brimming with fake tears, while the entire table stares at you like you've grown an extra head. Your father-in-law narrows his eyes. You glance at him between gasps and say sweetly, "Oh, forgive me. It just struck me as absurd. How we all pretend." The room goes silent. Then someone coughs, and the evening resumes, though noticeably tenser. You're not just laughing anymore. You're acting. Innocent, confused, maybe even unwell. A little too interested in candle flames. A little too startled by loud noises. You drop your spoon twice in one meal and murmur about voices in the walls. Because when people label you unstable, they also label you untouchable. No one wants to be the man who preys on a madwoman, at least not openly. And that right now is the closest thing you have to armor. Historians still debate whether female madness in medieval records was real affliction or convenient fiction. But in your case, it's strategy. Women who made sense could be controlled. Women who didn't, dangerous, embarrassing, best left alone. Lisa plays along brilliantly. She lets your hair stay mussed. She mumbles about poor sleep. She makes sure certain servants overhear her quietly worrying about your episodes. By week's end, people give you space. Even Lord Durand. For now. But something new happens. One evening, as you pass through the gallery, alone, humming a song that doesn't exist, your husband stops you. You're different, he says, squinting at you. You're twitchy. You smile wide. Do I frighten you, my lord? He blinks. A little. You tilt your head. Good. You walk away before he can reply. Later, Lisa claps her hands silently and grins. He's more scared of you now than he ever was of his father. You don't say it aloud, but you hope that's true. Because fear is your best currency. Still, it's a tightrope. One stumble, one misstep, and you go from untouchable to disposable. So you mix madness with moments of clarity. You weep over a cracked cup in the morning, then recite Psalm 43 flawlessly at Vespers. You ask whether geese dream, then host embroidery sessions where you stitch more evenly than anyone else. You leave people guessing, doubting, stepping back. One day you find a scrap of cloth under your pillow, a symbol stitched into it, the open eye. You hide it quickly. Later in the garden, Lady Brynhild approaches. "Keep performing," she murmurs while plucking a sprig of rosemary. He's afraid of what he can't predict. You ask, "How do you know?" "Because I did it once," she replies. "Years ago. Different man. Same hunger." You want to ask more, but her face closes like a book that's been slammed shut. The past is not something she lends. That night, you dream of laughing and weeping at the same time, of spinning in circles while men look on unsure whether to kiss your hand or tie your wrists. You wake dizzy. You begin hiding notes, scraps in the weaving room, tucked under flagstones, beneath the altar cloth in the chapel. Simple phrases. He watches the young. The priest cannot be trusted. Don't drink the cider on feast days. Little truths, enough to stir suspicion, to stoke awareness. You know not everyone will find them, but enough will. You begin to hear whispers, servants hesitating before speaking, women glancing sideways at the Lord when he enters a room, the old cook refusing to serve meat unless she tastes it first. This is what it means to plant unrest, not rebellion, not war, just doubt. It grows. You hear the steward scolding a guard for leaving his post. You hear someone claim Lord Durand's late-night walks disturb the dogs. You see fewer girls alone in corridors. And then, one afternoon, you catch the priest watching you. Not Lord Durand. You. You blink, bow your head, retreat. That night you sleep lightly, your fingers wrapped around the small blade Lise stole from the kitchen. In the morning, your husband avoids you. And Lord Durand, he watches again. But there's something different in his eyes. Not hunger, not victory, worry. For the first time, he doesn't smile. You're no longer his prey. You're a variable, and men like him hate variables. The next banquet is announced with little warning. A minor holiday, they say. A feast of saints and snow, and surviving another year under God's mysterious mercy. But the real reason is simpler. Lord Durand wants the hall full. When people eat and drink, they let their guard down. And when he eats and drinks, he makes moves. So you prepare. You dress the part of a devoted wife, warm burgundy gown, neatly braided hair, modest smile. But underneath, your body hums with strategy. This isn't just a meal, it's a performance. You arrive on your husband's arm. He's unusually quiet. He drinks slower than usual, glancing toward his father more than once. That's new. Maybe the seeds of doubt are finally growing roots in him too. The long table gleams with roast duck-spiced lentils, candied nuts, and pears in wine. The air is thick with tallow smoke laughter and low mutterings. You eat sparingly, every bite calculated. Lord Durand sits across from you tonight, not beside. A message may be distance offered as a gesture of restraint or a trap. You return his glances with soft detachment. You don't flinch, you don't hide. You meet his eyes like someone who has nothing left to lose. Historians debate the role of courtly games at medieval banquets. How much of what was said aloud was a shadow of what was really being negotiated. They rarely consider that women played too. Tonight, you play well. When Lord Durand raises his goblet, you raise yours. When he compliments your dress, you smile and say, "Your memory is sharp. I wore it last winter when the stables caught fire." He falters just a second, then chuckles. Well remembered. You both know what else happened that night. He cornered you near the stairwell, grabbed your wrist, told you obedience was more becoming than wit. You glance at your husband. He didn't see it then, but he sees now. He watches his father the way a falcon watches a snake. Dinner drags into song and stories. A bard recites a tale about a knight who falls in love with his own reflection, mistaking it for a maiden. You laugh, perhaps too loudly. Lord Durand narrows his eyes. Finally, the conversation turns toward inheritance land titles, dowries. I worry about lineage, Durand says, swirling his wine. Too many weak sons and difficult wives. A house must be ruled by someone with steel in their spine. Your husband stiffens. You gently place your hand on his. Strength, you say sweetly, isn't always loud. That quiets the table. He nods at you, but there's no warmth, only calculation. And what would you know of strength, dear girl? You look around the room, at Brynhild, at Lisa, at the girl you sheltered, at the cook who now keeps 2 knives on her belt instead of 1. You smile. I've been studying it up close. He doesn't reply. Instead, he sips his wine and changes the subject. But you feel it? He's losing his footing. After the meal, the hall empties slowly. A few guests linger sipping brandy and muttering gossip. You pretend to yawn, thank the steward, and excuse yourself. But just before you step out of the room, you feel a presence behind you. It's him. Not close, not touching. Just there. I wonder, he murmurs, how long your little charade will last. You turn to face him. Longer than yours, you reply. Is that a threat? No, you say. A forecast. He chuckles darkly. You've grown bold, dangerous. You step closer, lower your voice. You taught me how. And with that, you walk away. Back in your chamber, Lisa has drawn the curtains and lit a soft candle. She says nothing. Just helps you out of your gown, unties your braid, and presses a mug of warm spiced milk into your hands. How bad, she finally asks. You sip. He's rattled. Good. You both sit in silence for a while. Then Lise asks, do you think he'll stop? You shake your head. Not yet. You don't tell her the rest. You don't mention how he watched you during the meal with a look not of desire, but of resentment, like you were no longer prey, but a problem. That's worse, because men like Durand don't let problems live long. But you're ready. This time, you are also dangerous. You go to sleep with the small blade under your pillow and the herb pouch in your sleeve. Just in case, you find her in the herb garden, stooped over a patch of rue, her fingers stained green and her eyes half closed from the scent of crushed leaves. The widow Isabetta. No one really calls her that. Of course not in public. They just nod. When she passes, step aside when she enters, and never ever ask her why she keeps so many bones hanging from the rafters of her private room in the West Wing. You've been watching her for weeks now. She keeps to herself, rarely speaks, but always sees. Every servant she passes straightens. Even the guards lower their voices when she walks by. You sit beside her slowly, careful not to disturb the soil she's tending. For a long moment, neither of you speaks. Then she says, "You've lasted longer than the last one." You don't flinch. "I plan to last a good while more." Do you? Her tone is flat. Then you'll need more than prayers and polite smiles. I was hoping you say gently, "You might tell me what you used." She doesn't look up. Used for what? To stay alive? She snorts, a dry, humorless sound. Sharp tongue. Good start. You pause, then ask, "Did he ever try with you?" Isabetta pulls a weed with slow precision. Not exactly. I married his cousin. When I refused to keep quiet about how his father died, Durand made sure my husband caught a fever and never recovered. I was 22. Alone. No sons. You wait. Durand offered me a room, said I could remain under his care. Her voice darkens. He meant under his thumb. Or under him if I'd been stupid enough to comply. But you didn't. I fed him his own words. Made him think I was mad. Then made him think I was valuable. She smiles grimly. People leave mad women alone, but they pay witches. You blink. Are you one? Depends on who you ask. Her eyes finally meet yours. Do you need me to be? You don't answer directly. Instead, you ask, how do you survive someone like him? She leans close, and for a moment, her voice is nothing but air. You don't play to win. You play to outlast. You plant seeds that grow long after the predator is gone. Then she straightens, wipes her hands on her apron, and walks away. You sit in the garden a little longer, letting her words settle into your ribs like stones. Historians rarely speak of women like Widow Isabella, the quiet survivors, the ones who outlived more powerful men and left behind no records, but plenty of rumors. And maybe that's the point. A legend without detail is harder to destroy. That night, you dream of seeds cracking open beneath stone, tiny stubborn things pushing against centuries of pressure. You begin mimicking Isabella. You ask the cook to teach you how to mix dried plants into ink. You start writing psalms onto fabric, whispering as you work. You wear more black, speak less, and hum when you walk past doorways. People start avoiding your shadow. Even your husband knocks now. Lord Durand, however, has grown quiet. He watches you more than ever, but he doesn't speak. He seems to be waiting for you to slip to tremble to show the first sign of fatigue. But you've stopped bleeding in front of wolves. One morning you find a dead bird on your windowsill. A blackbird. Neck twisted, wings stiff. You stare at it for a long time. Then you pick it up by the feet, carry it to the chapel, and place it in the offering bowl. You say nothing. Later that day, the priest avoids your eyes. Lisa tells you the bird is a message. You tell her, so is the silence that follows. Because no one admits to killing the bird. No one mentions the blood. But everyone walks faster in the halls for a while, especially when you pass. That evening, your husband tries to speak to you over dinner. He starts. I've noticed you've changed. You don't look up. Change is a form of survival. He clears his throat. If you ever feel threatened, you raise your eyes then. Sharp, direct. Would you believe me if I said yes? He hesitates. I don't know. You nod. Then maybe I'll keep my answer to myself. He says nothing more. Later in your chamber, Lisa brings you wine and whispers. The steward's wife says Durand hasn't slept well in days. Keeps a dagger by his bed now. You smile. Good. Let him dream of me. Because you will haunt him daylight and dark, with laughter and silence, with fragments of truth and the threat of exposure. You don't need to strike. You only need to linger. It begins with a knock. Not on your door, but on his. A rare moment when you find yourself walking the upper corridor alone, footsteps soft against the stone, breath fogging in the chill air. You pause at the sound, your hand halfway to the stair rail, and turn your head. A page stands outside Lord Durand's chamber, one fist raised the other, clutching a sealed letter. You don't need to ask from whom. The crest is unmistakable. The abbot. You'd nearly forgotten the letter you sent from the shrine so long ago it feels like it belonged to another life, another version of you. But it worked, or at least it reached. The page knocks again. The door opens. A shadowy hand snatches the letter and slams the door shut. You linger, pretending to admire a tapestry of St. George slaying his dragon. The dragon looks a little too familiar. When you finally return to your chamber, Lisa is there, waiting. I've heard, she says, already knowing. One of the kitchen girls saw him tear it open. His face went red, then white. What did it say, you ask, knowing you'll never read it yourself? Lisa shrugs. No one knows. But he hasn't come downstairs. That evening, he does come down. Eventually. But he looks different, paler, thinner, unshaved, like the letter has peeled something away from him. The outer layer of command, maybe. The confidence. You eat supper in silence. You don't speak. You don't even look up until you feel his gaze boring into the top of your head. Then slowly, you meet his eyes. He blinks first. Your husband sits between you. He doesn't notice the moment or pretends not to. Either way, you know he's no longer the center of the triangle. You and Lord Durand have shifted the power between you, and the balance tilts. The next day, you receive a summons. Not from Lord Durand, from your husband. He waits for you in the solar pacing. When you enter, he says, "My father's been offered a position in the capital, on the bishop's council." It came suddenly. You raise an eyebrow. And will he accept it? Your husband nods. He's leaving in a week. You don't allow your relief to show on your face. Instead, you ask, "What of the estate? I'll run it." And your father, he looks at you. He says it's time for a younger voice to manage things, that he's tired of stone walls. You nearly laugh. Do you believe him? He hesitates. No. But I'm not asking questions. You nod. Then neither will I. Historians love tidy stories. They record promotions, appointments, titles, but they rarely write why a man really left a manor where he held power. They rarely ask what changed behind those stone walls. That night, you do not lock your chamber door. You sleep deeply, dreamlessly, and in the morning he is gone. No ceremony, no goodbyes, just a wagon at dawn cloaked and curtained. The guards whisper of a sudden departure. The servants pretend not to grin. Even the steward looks lighter, like something heavy has finally slipped off his shoulders. You watch from the tower window as the wagon rolls down the muddy road. You're not proud. You're not even happy. What you feel is harder to name. Not victory, not closure, just space, like a room you've finally aired out after weeks of rot. But something stays behind. A chill, a memory, a warning. You will never be the same girl who entered this manor. You've shed too many skins, stitched too many lies, burned too many letters. The next day, Lady Brunhild brings you a basket of rose hips. No words, just the gift. You take it like a queen accepting tribute. Imelda begins humming again while she works. Even the chapel feels lighter. In the courtyard, you see the girl the one Durand tried to send to your room feeding chickens. She looks up, sees you, and gives a tiny nod. You nod back. And though nothing grand has happened, no arrests, no duel, no poetic downfall, you feel the ground has shifted. The threat is gone. The system remains. But you have changed. Later Lise tells you, you won't be safe forever. Power just shifts shape. You smile. Then I'll learn the new shape. Because that's what women like you do. You adapt. You remember. You whisper warnings in the hallways, stitch them into linens, tuck them behind psalms. You survive. Winter comes late that year. The frost crawls in slow and quiet, clinging to the edges of windows, like it's uncertain whether it's still welcome here. The manor creaks in the morning with cold, but not dread. Fires are lit earlier. People hum more freely. Even the stone floors feel slightly less cruel beneath your slippers. There's no feast to mark Lord Durand's departure. No plaque nailed to a wall. No story preserved in the family records. His name fades from the daily conversations, like mist off a boiling pot. But you see the mark he left in the eyes that still flick to shadows, the hands that grip knives just a little tighter. Yet the longer he's gone, the more you sense something stirring. Possibility. One morning, your husband joins you in the chapel. Not because he was summoned, but because he wants to speak. I know, he says, that I didn't see what was happening. Or maybe I did. And I just didn't want to deal with it. You don't let him off that easily. You chose not to. He swallows. Nods. Yes, I chose not to. You don't forgive him. Not aloud. But you let him sit beside you for the full prayer. And you don't move your hand when his brushes yours. That's all he gets for now. Later, in the solar, Lady Brynhild passes you a strip of cloth to mend. A tear across the center, jagged like a bad memory. As you stitch it, she whispers, "I once thought you'd be gone within the month." "You surprised me." "I surprised myself," you reply. She gives you a rare smile. "Good. Keep doing that." The house adjusts to your presence now, not as a guest, not even as a wife, but as a figure. People begin coming to you for decisions. Not formal ones yet, but close. Which servants to keep through the winter? Which child is old enough to begin lessons? What to serve when the steward's wife gives birth? It happens subtly, and you let it, because you've learned power taken loudly is easily challenged, but power assumed quietly becomes part of the walls. In the garden, the last of the herbs are gathered before snow. You and Lise hang bundles of thyme and rosemary in the kitchen rafters, laughing at how the cook still pretends she isn't fond of either of you. "Do you think he'll come back?" Lisa asks softly. You pause. "I don't think he can. But if he does, you tie the bundle tight. Then he'll find I'm not the same woman." She grins. "You're worse." You both laugh. One evening, as snow finally dusts the rooftops, a messenger arrives. He bears a letter from the capital. You open it carefully, hands steady. The bishop's seal. A formal note. Polite. Unthreatening. Lord Durand has accepted a religious role. He has sworn a new vow. Reflection. The letter claims is his chosen path now. You almost pity the priests who'll have to endure his reflections. You toss the letter into the fire before the ink dries in your mind. In your chamber beside the hearth, you sit with your embroidery, an image forming now, slowly but clearly, a tower on a hill window, open light shining outward. Below it, a phrase stitched in pale blue thread. She watched and waited and remained. Historians won't record you. Not by name. You'll be listed only in someone else's lineage as wife of mother to lady at court. But the women will remember. The way they passed you in corridors with lowered eyes and left with lifted chins. The messages they stitched into bodices baked into bread, whispered beneath breath. The things they couldn't say out loud but said to you. And you'll remain. A quiet force. A patient storm. A woman who was once hunted and now haunts back. And now, the halls are quiet. The footsteps you once feared have faded into memory. The latch no longer clicks in the night. The air inside the manor is still soft, safe. Somewhere outside, snow drifts gently across the stone paths. The sky is heavy with stars that blink slowly, sleepily, like candles half burnt. You lie beneath warm blankets, the silence wrapping around you like wool. No voices calling your name. No shadows reaching toward your door. Just breath. Just stillness. Just the pulse of a life you carved out one thread at a time. You think of the garden of rue and rosemary nettles in your braid, the quiet strength of laughter, held just behind your teeth. You think of the women who came before and those who will come after, and you rest knowing you were a bridge between them. The fire crackles low. Your eyes grow heavy, and as the snow falls outside, your story folds gently into sleep, just like this night. The danger has passed. The silence is yours. Sleep well.